I remember the sound of the ocean that night. Steady, soft, almost like it was trying to calm me. Then came the sound that broke me. My son's voice, sharp, cold, unrecognizable. "Move to the guest room," he said. "We're bringing my wife's family. If you don't like it, there's a nursing home down the street." My hand froze around the phone. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. But then he repeated it, slowly, deliberately, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. And that was the moment I realized I'd built comfort for everyone but myself. "My name is Diane. I'm 63 years old, and until recently, I thought I'd earned my peace. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Maybe you've known a moment like mine, the kind that doesn't just hurt but redefines you. Because until that phone call, I was a woman who believed she had everything in order. After 30 years of running my catering company, a business I built from scratch while raising my son alone, I finally sold it. It wasn't just a business to me. It was proof that I could survive, that I could turn heartbreak and sleepless nights into something beautiful. When the sale went through, I didn't buy jewelry or a car. I bought a dream, a pale sunlit beach house nestled along the Carolina coast, wide porch, blue shutters, white curtains that danced with the wind. It smelled of salt, lemon polish, and freedom. For the first time in decades, I woke up without alarms, deadlines, or invoices, just waves. I'd sit on the deck with my morning coffee, toes tucked under a blanket, watching the sky turn from pink to gold. I thought that would be the rhythm of the rest of my life, soft, quiet, earned. And then, on the very first night in my new home, the phone rang. "Mom," Jason's voice began, "listen, Melissa's family is coming next week. We'll need the guest rooms." I laughed lightly, assuming he meant to visit for a weekend. "Well, of course, honey. I'll make up the beds. How many days are you staying?" There was silence. Then, "Actually, Mom, we're moving in. Temporarily." The word temporarily hung in the air like smoke. He didn't even pause before adding, "You can move to the guest room for now. It'll be easier for everyone. If not, well, there's a really nice assisted living place down the street. Melissa found it online." My heart stopped. I could almost hear my own breath echoing in the quiet house. "Jason," I said slowly, "this is my home. I just bought it." "I know," he replied impatiently. "But think about it. It's a big house and you're alone. Melissa's parents need somewhere to stay while they finish their renovation. We'll make it work." "We'll make it work." That's what people say when they've already decided you don't matter. The conversation blurred after that. His tone was brisk, his words clipped, as though he were speaking to a tenant, not his mother. By the time he hung up, the sea outside my window felt like a stranger, dark and endless. I stood by the window for a long time, the phone still in my hand. The moonlight fell across the glass tabletop, glinting off the champagne I hadn't finished. The bubbles had gone flat. So had everything else. I wanted to scream, to remind him of the nights I worked double shifts so he could go to college, of the birthday cakes I baked when money was tight, of how I clapped for him louder than anyone at his graduation. But I didn't. Instead, I sat down, staring at the pale blue walls and the framed photo of him as a little boy, smiling, frosting on his nose, his small hands gripping a whisk. The ache inside me wasn't anger yet. It was disbelief. Disbelief that the same child who once said, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll buy you a house by the ocean," had just told me to move into the guest room or a nursing home. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened to the waves until dawn, every crash against the shore reminding me that peace can vanish in a single sentence. And as the first streak of sunlight touched the horizon, I whispered to myself, "He doesn't know it yet, but I won't be moving anywhere." Then I picked up my notebook, turned to a clean page, and began to write down a plan. The next morning, I made my coffee the same way I always did. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and a dash of cinnamon. The ocean shimmered gold beyond the window, but it felt different now. The peace I'd imagined when I bought this house had a crack running through it. I stared at the mug, thinking of all the years it took to get here. I wasn't born into comfort. Everything I have, I built with my own hands, one long day, one burnout night at a time. When I was 32, my husband Robert passed suddenly from a heart attack. Jason was 7. We had savings, but grief doesn't care about numbers. It eats everything: money, energy, laughter. I had to rebuild, not just for me, but for him. So I started small, cooking for church events, baking for neighbors, then catering small weddings. That little spark grew into a business called Diane's Table. For years, it was just me and a handful of loyal employees, women like me, mothers who needed a second chance. We built it from the ground up. And I'll never forget the day I signed my first corporate catering contract. I went home and cried in the pantry, not from exhaustion, but from the shock of making it through. Jason saw it all. He'd help pack pastries after school, deliver trays on weekends. He used to call me Supermom. But something changed when he met Melissa. She was beautiful, smart, and ambitious, the kind of woman who spoke like she was always being recorded. From the beginning, she saw Jason's potential, and I'll admit she pushed him to want more. But she also began to rewrite how he saw me. Suddenly, I wasn't Supermom anymore. I was old-fashioned, too sentimental, too emotional about business. She didn't say those words directly to my face, but I heard them. You always do, when you've lived long enough. Over time, Jason stopped visiting for Sunday dinners. He said they were too busy, or that Melissa's parents had invited them over. They started spending holidays elsewhere, at ski resorts, spas, luxury villas. I told myself that's what young people do. They live fast and far away. But deep down, I knew. She didn't just take my son's attention. She took his empathy. When I finally sold Diane's Table, I thought maybe that distance would close. I even called Jason before signing the final papers. "Mom, that's great," he said. "You deserve some rest. You'll love the quiet life." He sounded proud, or maybe just relieved that I was stepping back. That sale was my clean slate, the culmination of 30 years of sleepless nights, invoices, and burned fingertips from hot pans. It gave me enough to buy my beach house, a symbol of independence, not indulgence. When I walked through those doors for the first time, I thought, this is it. This is my forever peace. White curtains swaying, wooden floors warm under my feet, sea air filling the house like forgiveness. But now, after that call, it all felt tainted. I spent that day in silence, walking from room to room, trying to remind myself that I had earned this, every inch of it. I thought about calling him back, demanding respect, reminding him whose name was on the deed. But anger wouldn't fix this. No, I needed clarity before confrontation. So I made a decision. I wouldn't push them away. Not yet. I'd let them come. Let them move in, take over rooms, rearrange furniture. Because sometimes the only way to see someone clearly is to let them show you who they truly are. I needed to know if the boy I raised was still somewhere inside the man who'd told me to move to the guest room. So that night, I wrote a single line in my notebook under the word plan. Let them think they're in charge, and then remind them whose house this really is. I closed the notebook, tucked it beneath the lamp, and looked out at the ocean. The sun was setting, orange bleeding into the horizon. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I remember it clearly because the air had that sticky sweetness that comes just before a storm. The ocean was calm, but the sky wasn't, and neither was I. From my porch, I saw their silver SUV crawl up the driveway like it owned the place. The trunk was packed to the brim. Boxes, luggage, plastic tubs labeled Melissa's Decor, and even a folded stroller, though they didn't have children. Jason stepped out first, phone still in his hand, barely looking up. Melissa followed, wearing oversized sunglasses and a white sundress that probably cost more than my first catering van. Behind them came her parents, Arthur and Joyce, walking like they were touring a resort they'd just bought. "Mom!" Jason called, tone cheerful but rehearsed. "We're here!" I smiled, the way mothers do when their hearts are breaking but their faces have to stay polite. "Welcome," I said softly. Melissa kissed my cheek without really touching it. "Oh, Diane, the photos online didn't do this house justice. It's perfect." Her eyes flicked around the porch, the living room beyond. Then she turned to Jason. "See, I told you it had potential." Potential. As if my home were a project. Within hours, boxes were everywhere. Her mother started wiping down surfaces that were already spotless. Her father opened my fridge, frowning at the lack of sparkling water options. Melissa marched through each room like a designer on assignment. "We'll move this sofa closer to the window. This rug feels dated. Oh, and maybe repaint that wall. The beige is a little sad." I stood silently, watching as the life I had imagined, quiet mornings, open space, my own rhythm, was rearranged around me. "Mom," Jason said, dropping his duffel by the stairs, "Melissa's parents will take the downstairs guest room. We'll use the one upstairs next to the balcony. You can use the smaller one at the back." I blinked. "The laundry room?" He hesitated, but Melissa jumped in smoothly. "It's cozy, Diane, and quiet. You'll love it." Cozy and quiet, like a cage. By evening, they were unpacked and laughing in my kitchen, the one I'd spent weeks organizing. Melissa's mother poured wine into crystal glasses she'd brought herself. "We'll make this place shine," she said brightly. "Family homes need a woman's touch." I almost laughed. There were 3 women in that house, but apparently only one counted. While they toasted to new beginnings, I stood by the sink, washing dishes that weren't dirty, pretending the steam was fog and not the tears burning behind my eyes. Through the reflection in the window, I saw my late husband's photograph sitting on the shelf. Or rather, I saw where it used to sit. The space was empty. I found the frame later in a drawer, tucked beneath a pile of new coasters Melissa had bought that afternoon. That was when something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was awake. The next morning I made breakfast. Out of habit more than kindness. They came down late, dressed like they were heading to brunch at a country club. Jason barely looked at me when he said, "Mom, Melissa's planning to redecorate the living area. You're okay with that, right?" I sipped my coffee slowly. "Of course. It's just a house." Melissa smiled, satisfied. "Exactly. And a house should evolve, don't you think?" I nodded. It should. But in my mind, I was already evolving something else. A plan. That night, when the house finally quieted and I could hear the waves again, I sat on the porch under the string lights I'd hung myself. My notebook rested on my lap. I flipped to a clean page and wrote, "They think they're building comfort. They're actually building proof." Because I wasn't going to fight them yet. No, I was going to let them get comfortable, let them talk, let them reveal exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless. The storm clouds gathered far out at sea that night, silent, heavy, waiting. And I thought, good, let it rain. By the 3rd day, my once peaceful beach house felt like a hotel I couldn't check out of. Melissa's voice echoed through the halls like a ringtone I couldn't silence, ordering new curtains, planning to update the flow, moving my things as if they were clutter. Jason barely noticed. He was always glued to his phone, scrolling through emails, pretending he didn't hear his wife's every insult disguised as advice. But I heard, and I remembered. That morning, while Melissa's father complained about the weak Wi-Fi and her mother critiqued my breakfast as a little heavy for coastal living, I smiled politely, then stepped outside with my notebook and my coffee. The ocean was gray that day, still beautiful but unreadable. I thought about all the times I'd trusted people to value what I built, employees, clients, even family, and how every time someone eventually tried to take more than they'd earned, this time would be different. I wasn't just going to endure it, I was going to end it. I started small, with a few quiet phone calls. First to my lawyer, Martha, an old friend who'd been with me through every business contract I'd ever signed. She didn't even need me to explain much. "I can hear it in your voice, Diane. What happened?" I told her. Every word. The guest room, the threat, the move-in, the way they talked about my home like it was theirs. There was a pause. Then her voice came back sharp as glass. "They're trying to box you out of your own property. Don't say a word to them, and don't lose your temper. Leave the law to me." Next, I called my financial advisor, a younger woman named Rosa, practical and discreet. She looked over my accounts and told me something that made my stomach drop. "Diane," she said softly, "your son tried to access your investment account last month. He called my office saying he was helping you manage your retirement plan. I didn't grant access, of course, but he was persistent. Persistent." That word rang louder than the waves. It wasn't about the guest room. It wasn't about family visits or space. It was about control, money, ownership. They didn't just want to live in my house. They wanted to own it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked under the weight of new furniture and false laughter. From the hallway, I heard Melissa's voice. "Jason, your mom doesn't need all this space. If she really loved us, she'd put it in both your names. You're her only son." My chest tightened, but I didn't move. He didn't argue. He just muttered, "We'll talk about it later." That was confirmation enough. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and opened my notebook again. This time, I didn't write a plan. I wrote a promise. If they want to play house, I'll show them who owns the keys. Over the next few days, I played my part perfectly, smiled when Melissa showed me color samples, nodded when her mother suggested turning my study into a game room. Every time Jason mentioned family ownership, I simply said, "We'll see, dear." Meanwhile, I met with Martha over video call, quietly signing documents to reaffirm that everything, house, savings, and retirement, was in my sole name, with a clause preventing unauthorized transfers. We even added a little surprise. If anyone attempted to access my assets or make claims to my home, the law would automatically flag it as attempted fraud. A quiet storm, indeed. By Friday, they had no idea what I'd done. Jason still walked around barefoot with his coffee, Melissa still bossed everyone, and her parents still lounged like guests at a resort. But when I stood at the window that evening, watching the sun sink behind the ocean, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in days. Because now, for the first time, I wasn't the vulnerable mother being cornered. I was the woman holding every card, and none of them knew it. I looked at the reflection of the family in the window, bustling behind me like they belonged there, and whispered to my own reflection, "He thinks I'm quiet because I'm old. I'm quiet because I'm ready." By Saturday afternoon, the house looked like a showroom version of itself. Melissa had rearranged nearly everything: the sofas, the artwork, even the seashell bowl I'd placed on the coffee table from my very first beach walk. She'd replaced it with a glass sculpture shaped like an anchor. The irony wasn't lost on me, but that morning, I woke up with a clarity that felt like sunrise after a long storm. I brewed coffee, played soft jazz in the background, and told everyone I wanted to host a thank you dinner for the week. Melissa smiled, assuming it was an apology for my earlier stubbornness. Jason looked relieved. They didn't realize that the dinner was my stage, and I was finally ready to perform. The ocean breeze carried through the open windows that evening, cool and golden. I dressed in my pale blue linen dress. The one Robert used to say made my eyes look like water. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see an old woman being pushed aside. I saw the woman who built Diane's table from nothing, the woman who survived loss, raised a son alone, and turned pain into power. The dining table gleamed, white candles flickering, wine glasses sparkling. The smell of rosemary chicken and lemon butter sauce filled the air. Melissa's mother gasped when she saw the setup. "Diane, this looks like a magazine spread." I smiled. Old habits die hard. They all gathered, cheerful, talking loudly about plans for family gatherings and holiday photos by the water. I poured wine for everyone, listening, nodding. Jason raised his glass. To family and new beginnings. I raised mine too. To truth, I said softly. He blinked. What was that, Mom? Nothing, dear. Just truth. Dinner went on with laughter, mostly theirs, but I could feel it building in my chest, that steady confidence that comes when you finally stop fearing the storm. After dessert, I stood up slowly. I have a small announcement, I said. Melissa leaned forward eagerly, probably expecting a toast in her honor. Instead, I said, I've sold the house. The room went silent. Even the ocean seemed to pause. Jason's fork froze mid-air. What? I sold it, I repeated calmly, taking a sip of wine. The papers were finalized yesterday. Melissa's face drained of color. You're joking, right? I shook my head. No, dear. I'm moving into a coastal villa community. It's smaller, peaceful, and, oh, here's the best part. No guests allowed for more than 2 nights. Her mother's wine glass slipped, shattering against the table. Jason finally found his voice. Mom, this doesn't make sense. You just bought this place. I did, I said gently, and now I'm done with it. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. You see, I realized something this week. A house isn't peace when the people inside it treat you like an inconvenience. Melissa's lips trembled. You can't just sell it. We moved everything here. Our things. Oh, I made sure to exclude those, I interrupted. They're still yours, but the new owners, well, they'd prefer the property vacated by next Friday. Jason's face turned pale. Next Friday? Yes, I said, smiling faintly. They were very understanding when I told them I might have family who overstayed their welcome. Melissa's father finally spoke, his voice tight. This is outrageous. I looked at him evenly. What's outrageous is assuming someone else's home was yours to claim. I walked toward the window then, looking out at the waves. I built a life from nothing, and when I finally tried to rest, I was told to move to the guest room, or worse, a nursing home. I turned back to them, meeting each of their eyes. So I decided to move, but not the way you planned. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the ocean and the faint crackle of candle wax. I poured myself another glass of wine and sat down slowly. You can finish your dinner, I said quietly. But after tonight, I think we'll all be dining in separate homes. Jason stood, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. I can't believe you'd do this. I met his eyes, calm, steady, and I can't believe I had to. The silence after my announcement stretched thin and sharp, like the air before thunder. Melissa's mother was still frozen, her fingers trembling over the shards of her broken glass. Jason's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. For the first time in days, I felt the calmest person in the room. Melissa finally found her voice. You sold the house. Each word was spat like it burned her tongue. Yes, I said, and quite successfully, might I add. The new owners were delighted. Apparently, beach houses with ocean views are in high demand, especially ones with a touch of family drama. Jason's eyes widened. Mom, this isn't funny. It's not meant to be, I replied softly, but it is fair. Melissa pushed back her chair. You can't just do this behind our backs. I raised an eyebrow. Behind your backs? Melissa, I didn't know I needed your permission to manage my own property. She crossed her arms, shaking with anger. You're being vindictive. No, I said evenly. I'm being awake. Jason stood, voice rising. You blindsided us, Mom. We had plans. I met his gaze, steady, unwavering. So did I. But mine were interrupted the moment you told me to move into a guest room in my own home. Do you remember that, Jason? Because I do. Every single word. His face flushed, guilt flickering behind his eyes. Melissa tried to step in, her tone syrupy again. We were just trying to make things easier for you, Diane. You're getting older. I cut her off. Stop. She blinked. Don't say older like it's an insult. I've lived long enough to recognize manipulation when it's dressed as concern. I let my words settle before I added, you see, I learned something about you two this week, about your plans. Would you like to hear what they were? Jason's jaw tightened. Mom, please. No, I said, my voice firm now. You'll want to listen, because I have the recordings. Melissa's smirk faltered. Recordings? Yes, I said simply. From the phone call, the one where my son told me to move to a nursing home, and from the nights you two whispered in the hallway about taking over the house and managing my accounts. You weren't very careful. Her face drained of color. You what? That's illegal. No, dear. What's illegal is attempting to access someone's financial accounts without consent. You remember that, Jason? He swallowed, hard, avoiding my eyes. I called Rosa, I continued. She told me about your little attempt to co-sign on my investment accounts last month. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Jason's shoulders sagged. Mom, I was just... What? I snapped, the calm in my tone cracking for the first time. Protecting me, helping me, or trying to make sure my money was safe, in your hands. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Melissa's parents stood awkwardly, eyes darting between us. I turned to them, my voice polite but final. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, I suggest you start packing tonight. The movers will be here in 3 days. Melissa's mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. They both shuffled toward the stairs without another word. Jason looked shattered. Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I nodded slowly. That's the problem, Jason. You never mean it. You just let it happen. I walked toward the window, the moonlight falling across the waves. My voice softened. You were my greatest joy, my reason to fight through every hardship. And somehow, you became the person who thought I was disposable. He stepped forward. Please, Mom, don't do this. I turned to face him, tears stinging but my voice steady. I already did. When the door finally closed behind them, the house felt like it exhaled. The air grew lighter. The silence was no longer hostile. It was healing. I sat by the window until sunrise, watching the tide pull away from shore, leaving smooth, untouched sand behind. That's what letting go felt like. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. A week later, the movers came. They carried away every trace of Melissa's curated chaos. The velvet pillows, the anchor sculpture, the scented candles that never smelled like home. By noon, the house was empty again. The echo of their laughter was gone, replaced by something softer, truer. Peace. I walked through each room one last time, my fingers brushing the walls I'd once painted myself. There were faint outlines where my family photos had hung, memories that had lived here briefly, then outgrown the space. When I reached the porch, the ocean breeze greeted me like an old friend. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, cleansing everything that week had stained. The house wasn't mine anymore, but my freedom was. 3 days later, I moved into my new home, a small villa just a few miles up the coast. 2 bedrooms, whitewashed walls, a wraparound balcony that looked straight out to the sea. No noise, no tension, no one telling me where I belonged. I furnished it simply. A wicker chair by the window, my husband's photo back on the mantel, my mother's old quilt folded at the foot of my bed. Every item was placed with purpose. Every corner whispered mine. The community was quiet. Mostly women my age, some widowed, some divorced, all survivors of one story or another. We shared morning walks, recipes, and sometimes silence, the kind that heals instead of hurts. One evening, as I watched the sun melt into the water, I received a letter. It was from Jason. The handwriting was uneven, shaky. He wrote that Melissa had left him, that she'd blamed him for everything, for the house, for the exposure, for the embarrassment. He said he'd lost his job too and was trying to start over. Then, near the end, came the line that stung and soothed all at once. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom, but I finally understand what it means to build something on your own and how easy it is for others to destroy it. I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then I folded the letter carefully and placed it beneath a jar of seashells on my table. Not to forget, but to remember that forgiveness doesn't always need to be spoken. It can live quietly, like low tide pulling back from the shore. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The horizon was painted in streaks of gold and lavender. The world was calm again, and so was I. I thought of all the versions of myself that had existed before this moment. The tired widow, the overworked business owner, the lonely mother hoping for love in return. And now, this one, the woman who finally chose herself without apology. A seagull soared across the waves, catching the last light of the day. I smiled. Some people think starting over is something that happens in your 30s, when the world still calls you young. But I've learned, sometimes it happens at 63, after a phone call that breaks your heart wide open and shows you where the cracks were hiding all along. I sat down and opened my notebook one last time. On the final page, under all the plans and scribbled notes, I wrote just one line. They wanted me to move out of my own home. Instead, I moved out of their control. I closed the book and set it beside my glass. The sky deepened into orange fire, then dusky blue, and as the first stars blinked above the water, I whispered to the waves, "Thank you for teaching me that peace isn't found in a house. It's found in a boundary, and the courage to keep it." The ocean rolled softly below, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like it was applauding. Not for revenge, not for victory, but for freedom,